What you're about to watch is a mashup of the biggest learnings and takeaways from the first 5 episodes of my new podcast. It's called Podcast Graveyard. It's a show in which I unpack the stories of the podcasts that are no longer with us and understand what caused their demise. You can listen to the full episodes wherever you listen to podcasts by clicking the link in the description. Or you can, of course, watch it on YouTube. What's the worst piece of podcasting advice you ever got?
Oh.
Just get started, which is simultaneously the worst and the best, because to do a podcast, you do need to just get started, but don't just start recording your episode number 1 and then release it. I think that's a terrible idea.
I think someone told me once to externally commit. So basically announce stuff before it's actually come about and it will hold you accountable. But I think that was literally my biggest anxiety. And the reality is that no one remembers, no one cares, right? But in my head, I was like, oh my God, everyone's waiting for this podcast and I cannot be bothered to make it and it's so stressful.
I think the worst piece of podcasting advice is that it's always worth it. Just do it. That to me is really stupid advice for anything.
The fact that consistency will save you above all, because it won't. If anybody says that podcasting success is dependent on X, that definitely means it's not, right? It has to be everything. A guest isn't going to save you. Consistency isn't going to save you. Content isn't going to save you. Your Instagram's not going to save you. Your TikTok's not going to save you. Nothing's going to save you.
So how much time did you put into it, do you think?
Oh, I did put in a hefty amount of time.
Time is definitely the biggest issue when making a podcast. It is a very time-consuming process. A lot of steps, a lot of tools, and it does add up.
Between me and my partner, we probably put 3 or 4 hours into each episode.
Well, let's see. We got 10 episodes, 2 hours of planning per episode, so 20 hours of planning. Maybe 2 hours of recording each, so 20 hours of recording. Post-production, 2 hours each, so now you're at 60 to 80 hours for the 10 episodes.
How long do you think you spent?
Well, probably
longer than I think you spent.
No, I don't know. I think less. Almost just about the amount of minutes it lasted.
Well, just to add in that, I did 0 editing of any way, shape or form.
In the end, when I really knew what I was doing, it added up to about 10 hours work per episode. So I'll do typically 5 hours on a Saturday, 5 hours on a Sunday, but that's almost a full day's work, both days of your weekend. And it was completely eating up my weekend, I was to do a weekly episode, you're dedicating your life to it.
What are some of the worst decisions you made when making the podcast?
Doing it by myself, I think, was a big error. No one was holding me accountable, but also there was no one there to help share the edit with.
Was saying yes to guests who either I wasn't interested in at all, or people who I initially was interested in their product, thought this is cool, but then they came on and they were just 100% sales pitch. They weren't interested in having a conversation. They had their lines pre-scripted and it was just totally one-sided, and I just felt, exploited on my own show, which I really didn't appreciate either. So that's one of the mistakes that sticks in my mind.
The worst decision was doing it too often. We could have done one every 2 months, and then I could have given the 20 hours to each episode that would have made it a work of art. And then it would have been about the show and less about the output. That probably was a big mistake.
Why did the podcast die?
It's actually really sad. I think about it a lot. Isn't that really wild? I literally think about my dead podcast so much. It is my Roman Empire.
February, we're doing well. We're doing all right. Podcast is rolling. LinkedIn's rolling. We got content rolling. We got clients coming in. Just landed a 12-episode contract. Cool. March comes around. What's going on? Things are slowing down a little bit. I'm realizing our recurring revenue is not at a good place.
If it's not too emotional for you, can you tell me why your podcast died?
I stopped doing it.
It died because I literally couldn't be bothered. I just couldn't be bothered to do it anymore.
Ironically, the final nail in the coffin was me starting a startup to solve the problem of podcasting taking too much time. Yeah.
If I had a sponsor, if I'd had funds, I would have hired an editor to do it and I would have genuinely continued doing it probably until today, but I just couldn't be fucked.
So did you mourn its passing, or were you relieved to see it die?
Like I say, I haven't completely let it go, so I still think it will rise again at some point. I haven't reached the mourning phase.
I think that's why I really struggled to let go of it as well, because I was I enjoyed doing that. I enjoyed being part of that kind of podcaster community, and I did mourn it, and I really struggled to let go of it, I think, for a really long time.
If your podcast had a headstone, what would you put on it?
This podcast died so that yours didn't have to.
Oh my God, that's such a hard question.
Oh, this is great. The word meandering would come into it.
I don't know, it'd be something like, here lies humans of LinkedIn. John cares about humans, but not enough to keep talking to them.
A beautiful, energetic, meandering river of
Nonsense.
of nonsense. Yeah.
I know, of course, it was chaotic, but I still have as much belief in it
I
now
do.
as I did then.
Yeah.
I do. So it comes from very good intentions, genuinely, doesn't it? Like,
Yeah.
the thought process, we still believe to this day, has a place.
My headstone might be like, oh, I didn't realise you were dead. It's
Very
still
good.
going. It's still
Love
going.
that. That's
yeah,
great.
Yeah,
We'll never die.
yeah.